No, I said that ideally we tend to think, we want to think that being a good citizen makes us good people too. You're a good citizen, you abide by the law, you never violate the law, you go by the book, that means you're a good person. We're sorry, it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing at all. Think of those good citizens in Nazi Germany. Think of those good citizens in apartheid South Africa. Think of a good citizen in 19th century America. If you knew of a runaway slave as a good citizen, you had to report him. Or a runaway wife, you had to report her to the police. And she would be caught and beaten up by her husband. Yeah? That's what being a good citizen was like. Now, if you could go back to 19th century America, or to Nazi Germany, or to South Africa at the time of the apartheid, would you tell those people, yes, be good citizens? Hopefully not. You would tell them to break the law, because that law is immoral, right? So you would tell them to break the law. So we want to think that our laws are better than the Nazi laws, definitely they are, or the apartheid laws, or the 19th century American laws. But we don't really know what people a couple hundred years from us will think. So a moral person always have, first and foremost, the obligation to follow his conscience. And before obeying a law, his conscience has to give its assent, must say yes. And hopefully it'll happen for 99% of the laws that we, or even ideally for 100%. But we have the obligation first to judge every law morally, so to speak, morally, not simply blindly obeying them as people did in Nazi Germany or in 19th century America. As we will see with Thoreau, and we discussed Thoreau in the second part of the class, some people are visionaries. Some people say, hey, how can we do this? This is wrong. I'm not going to go with it, even if they think I'm crazy. And so it's thanks to those people that society moves and develops and morally advances, okay? But you need to remember this. Being a good citizen does not necessarily equals being a good person. Right? The morality answers the question, what is fair, what is just, what is good, what is right? Again, morality answers the question, what is fair, what is good, what is just, what is right? The law simply answers the question, what is legal? And we don't really have to enter into your motivations. The law will, at times we try to enter into the motivations that led a person to commit a crime, but not to the extent that the moral law can do that. Okay? So from the moral law viewpoint, for religious people, God will have the perfect judgment on what you did, despite appearances. But the law can only go by appearances, by what you do, by what appears. Okay, so hopefully those concepts are clear by now. Let me now start with another list of concepts that we need to discuss. I'd like to start with the concept of virtue. These are important concepts in moral theory, and we'll be using them later in the semester. Therefore, I'd like to clarify what we mean by virtue. Virtue, what do you guys understand by virtue? Mark, are you a virtuous man? Yes. Sure, say yes. Yes. Of course, a virtuous person, a virtuous man. Of course you are. All men are virtuous. Women, we don't know. And you know why? Well, the word virtue is made up of two roots. V-I-R, ver, which means man. That's the origin of the word. To be virtuous, technically speaking, or etymologically speaking, means simply to be manly. to be manly. That's where you get the word virility. Virility means masculinity. So virtue, that's part of the Western tradition that the radical feminists will really get mad about, okay? So all the good things go for men. Like, yeah, virtues, if you're virtuous, it means you're manly. We don't like manly women, right? So women can be truly virtuous, only men can. Then in the 19th century, a term of romanticism, that's turned around, and then it's time for men to have fun, and women become all spiritualized and virtuous, and yeah. But the tradition says to be virtuous. Now, it's to be manly. Now, in Greek times, in ancient Greek times, there was a different understanding of virtue. It was called arete by Aristotle. See, I'm going to give you here two different concepts of virtue. The Aristotelian concept of virtue. So, Aristotle and then we're going to talk about the Judeo-Christian, Jewish-Christian concept of virtue. Okay? So, yeah, Aristotelian concept of virtue. But for Aristotle, again, 4th, 5th century BCE, the 400s BCE, actually, it comes a little later, the 300s and 400s BCE. For Aristotle, virtue is the mean in between two extremes. So virtue is synonymous with moderation. And the way you achieve virtue, the way you acquire virtue is through practice and repetition. That's why we have the word virtuoso. Virtuoso. A virtuoso is a virtuous person in a specific kind of virtue, not a moral one, but in playing the violin, the guitar, the piano. We call them virtuosos. Just mean they have achieved this technical virtue. Right? How do you achieve a virtue? Well, you want to be generous, for example. Well, you don't give all of your money to the poor because that's crazy, and you don't give so little that you are stingy. You give, what you think is reasonable. The mean in between two extremes. And by doing that over and over, you shape yourself as a virtuous person. You shape yourself as a virtuous person by doing that over and over. So the first time, it'll hurt when you decide to give whatever, $30 every month to a charity. By the 6th month, it'll hurt less. 1 year later, it'll be part of your budget. You don't even need to think about it twice. By that time, you have shaped yourself into a virtuous person. It feels no pain to give that money because you are a virtuous person on that particular account. Okay? That's how you cultivate virtue for Aristotle. Now, from the Judeo-Christian viewpoint, not so. Remember Jesus telling one of his would-be followers, if you want to have a treasure in heaven, go sell everything you have, give it to the poor, and follow me. Everything you have. So, in the case of Christianity, it's going to the extreme. You give everything, you give up your life. It's a complete giving up of something. And that's how you become virtuous instantly, not through repetition, but just in a moment, you achieve salvation, you achieve saintness, sainthood, you become a true virtuous, good person. Now, from the Aristotelian viewpoint, Christian virtue is nonsense. Give everything you have? That's nonsense. That's excess. From the Christian viewpoint, Aristotelian virtue is lukewarm virtue at best, but not real virtue. So, two different concepts of virtue. As we will see later in our lectures, there are also other ideas in Greek thought, in ancient Greek thought, which are different from Christian thought. And we'll see how both types of ideas have survived side by side through the Western tradition to our day. Okay? Let me now talk about the formal and the material. These two aspects of moral judgment, the formal and the